Let's talk about Labour. Keir Starmer is preparing to purge far-left Labour members, part of what are called poisonous campaign groups from the party, in a confrontation with operators loyal to Jeremy Corbyn. I'm joined now by Andrew Fisher to talk about this. He was author of Labour's 2017 Manifesto and the party's Executive Director of Policy under Jeremy Corbyn. Andrew.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. So, what are your thoughts then on this development?
I think the day before restrictions ease on COVID, I think when the government are threatening to cut the universal credit by £20 a week for 6 million households, when the pensions triple lock's under threat, Labour's decided to talk amongst itself, and that, I think, is going to be damaging for us. It makes us look divided. Keir Starmer himself said after the Hartlepool by-election loss, we haven't set out a strong enough case for the country. Very often we've been talking to ourselves. Well, he still hasn't set out a strong enough case for the country, and he's still talking to himself, or, the party's still talking to itself. This is really, I think, counterproductive. If there are people who have said things that are anti-Semitic, they can be expelled under existing rules. This is just, I think, a huge distraction for the Labour Party. And won't do the party any good whatsoever.
It has been an issue that's dogged the Labour Party, though, isn't it? I mean, is this not him
Absolutely.
just trying to draw a line under it and distance himself from what went before?
I think he probably does see it as trying to distance himself from what went before. But, look, Jeremy Corbyn expelled dozens of people who were found to have engaged in anti-Semitic acts. The party's machinery was very slow at the beginning, and it took a while to get that done promptly enough. I'm happy to concede that. But, this isn't... Nobody thinks that, anti-Semites should be welcome in the Labour Party or any other, racists or bigots, to be honest. So there's not really a debate over that. And if there are individuals that are engaged in it, there are existing rules to do this. This NEC thing tomorrow is a media hit, basically. They've decided that what they need to tell the country at this time is we're fighting amongst ourselves and we're tough on this, or we've changed. Actually, what the people want to hear is what the Labour Party stands for politically. People aren't going to vote Labour because of some internal thing about four groups nobody's ever heard of in the real world, and that barely exist in the real world anyway. They've got 10 members and a dog, most of them. So this is, I think, the issue here is not, for me, whether the Labour Party should have these people in or not. It's about what Labour is saying to the country. And at the moment, people aren't sure where Labour stands on things. I watched the Sunday political programmes this morning. Labour seemed to be saying we're against the restrictions being eased, but didn't actually say it. And I think if you look at, say, Sadiq Khan in London or Andy Burnham in Manchester, they've been quite clear about masks should continue. We think the easing of restrictions is wrong. And if you look at the election results back in May, Andy Burnham did very well in Manchester, Sadiq Khan re-elected comfortably in London. Keir Starmer, where he was the front person for a lot of Labour councils and for the Hartlepool by-election, did really badly. And that's because he's not clear about what he stands for.
Is it more perhaps that it's easier to get elected as a Labour candidate in a city than it is outside in the more rural areas?
Well, I look at the town I grew up in, Worthing on the south coast. Got a really good active Labour Party for the first time in decades due to the fact that lots of members joined the party under Jeremy Corbyn. There's, I think, 16 Labour councillors now in Worthing, which is historically quite a Tory town, including county councillors, and they've done that. So in areas like that and in others as well, Labour are doing okay. So yes, of course, Labour's always had a stronger showing in cities than it does in more rural areas. That's definitely true. But the thing is, I don't think, I look at the polling, 47%, this is an Ipsos Mori poll out earlier this month, 47% of Labour voters think the party needs to change leader, only 33% disagree. This is Labour voters, not members, not left-wing activists. That's the perception of voters. They don't know what Keir Starmer stands for. His personal ratings are terrible. The latest polls, Kantar had one out last week, there's a 13-point gap. Now, 2019 was a disastrous election for Labour. I'll be the first to admit that. But there was an 11-point gap between us and the Tories then, and it's now 13. I mean, he's had 15 months and done nothing.
Well, he's in a difficult.
Yes,
but he's in a difficult position, though, isn't he? I mean, it's very hard to say that the country should not protect themselves in this way, or you shouldn't lock down in this way. I mean, we're in really bizarre times now. So he has sort of become known as the "I agree with Boris" candidate, but it's hard to really take an opposite position to some of the.
I don't think it's been difficult at all. I mean, I think Boris Johnson was slow to lock down in autumn. He was slow to lock down in January. You could have criticised him then. Statutory sick pay. Matt Hancock said at the beginning of the pandemic, right back in early 2020, I couldn't afford to live on this. It's still at the same rate. Labour hasn't been campaigning on that and saying, well, look, the reason people aren't self-isolating is because they can't afford to. They need to go to work to earn money because they can't get by on £94 a week. You can't pay the rent with that. Labour could have been really firing on a load of things to do with the pandemic rather than just agreeing with the Tories. So I think that's not right. And I think a lot of people are quite critical of how the government has handled it. We've got one of the worst death rates in Europe. Our case rates are going up. We've got more cases than the whole of Europe combined at the moment. I think there's a lot of anger out there about how this pandemic's being mishandled by the government, and not a lot of trust in them.
Do you think that Keir Starmer is trying to differentiate himself to Jeremy Corbyn in that he's very polite, he's very sort of softly spoken, he speaks like a lawyer. His problem is that his opposite number speaks like a clown. I mean, it's a bit difficult to get noticed on stage when you're on stage with Ken Dodd.
I agree with you. I think, Boris Johnson has, the one thing I'll say, I guess it's semi-complimentary, is has a bigger personality than Keir Starmer, but I don't think that's a bad thing. Keir Starmer's I've given him the benefit of the doubt at the beginning. I think he was quite a serious person. He's competent, he's intelligent. I don't disagree with any of that about Keir Starmer. He's a thoughtful person as well. But he's not been effective as a leader. There's no doubt about that. His personal ratings show the country thinks that. And you've got to take people on. Yes, he can differentiate himself from Jeremy Corbyn, and he should try and build his own thing. But you do that around issues that people are interested in, about what they think about the issues facing us as a country now, the social care crisis, the taking away of the pensions triple lock, if that's what the government ends up doing. They seem to be pushing in that direction.
Well, that's a unique and special circumstance with that at the moment, isn't it? Because one of the locks is attached to something that's gone through the roof for weird circumstances.
It might do. There's speculation that it might do. I mean, and also, look, we have one of the lowest pensions in Europe. Yeah. Germany, France, Ireland. So what if it goes up by 8%? It will still be lower than in many other countries. And I think... But
again, I'd have to say that the COVID has taken all the oxygen out of the room. I mean, all of these things are justifiable things to criticise the government about and to position Labour. But all people are talking about and thinking about is masks, catching a disease, this invisible menace. Can I get on a bus? Am I going to go to work? And so on.
And absolutely. But where does Keir Starmer stand on that? I don't know at the moment. And I don't think the country knows. So if that's the most important issue, and I agree with you, it definitely is, by the way, facing people, where's Labour on it? Where's Labour's clear position on it?
Do you think that there's any echoes with what happened in America? Because if Boris Johnson is our Donald Trump, and there are definite echoes there, is Keir Starmer our Biden? Because Biden is a very understated figure. He sort of made it... it was quite difficult to get noticed when his opposite number was Donald Trump. But he won.
Yeah, I think Donald Trump is obviously a more extreme version of Boris Johnson. I'm not going to defend Boris Johnson, but he is a level or two worse. But I think the thing is, Joe Biden actually, when you look at what he's done, both in the latter end of his campaign for president and since he's become president, he's tried to work, not always agreed, and he's disagreed with a lot of things, and there's been disagreements between him and the left, but they've tried to work together on some areas and some issues around migration, where obviously Donald Trump had a very reactionary position on that, on things around the Green New Deal and investment. Joe Biden, I watched a clip of him the other day saying, when there was these complaints about, there aren't enough workers, labour shortages in the US, similar thing to what's being said here by employers. And he said, well, here's the solution, pay them more. It was a clarity, punchy,
Yes, but this was after...
The Democrats isn't affiliated to the trade unions in the same way that the Labour Party is. I haven't heard Keir Starmer say things like that.
Right, but but Keir Starmer hasn't been elected yet. Surely that Keir Starmer...
No, but he still gets on the media. He can still speak. He can still articulate thoughts and ideas.
Yes, but I think that after Jeremy Corbyn, surely one of the things that is concerning Keir Starmer is he doesn't want to say anything that's going to upset, that's going to frighten the horses. If he's going slowly and quietly and letting Boris Johnson perhaps fight himself to death.
I think that's a very dangerous thing because I can see the strategy in doing that. I think that's okay if the Tory party is imploding like it was under John Major, and we always think about this thing with Tony Blair is that he played it safe. Tony Blair inherited a 20-point polling lead. None of his successors have had that fortune. John Smith was a very good Labour leader who sadly was taken from us too early and would have made a great Prime Minister in my view. But Keir Starmer hasn't got that latitude. He's got to do that. And people don't think he's a strong leader. They don't think the Labour Party's united. They don't think he's a Prime Minister in waiting. And the polling gap between us and the Tories has got worse since the 2019 election. So I think he can't be complacent and just think, well, the Tories will mess up and it'll all come crashing down for them. He's got to step up, show that he's got strength. He doesn't have to be populist. He doesn't have to be, sloganising or ranting. He should be his own person. John Smith wasn't a ranter or a kind of a demagogue of any sort, but he was very popular, very well respected, could marshal arguments very well. Was a lawyer by background, like Keir Starmer, but was somebody who engaged on the issues that mattered to people, not in fighting his own party or just taking a kind of middle road on everything.
You were the author of the 2017 Manifesto. Now, I used to read sections of it on the air, and people would say, "Oh yes, I quite agree with that." Until I told them that it was the Labour Manifesto, and then they would say, "Oh, well, no, we don't want that." Do you think that the Labour Party have a sort of a toxic relationship with the public now?
Well, let's look back at that 2017 election. Labour got 40% of the vote, just over, in that election. At the moment, we're polling at 31 or 30 on one poll. So I don't think there was a problem with that. And actually, by most kind of accounts, the manifesto contributed to Labour kind of shooting up in the polling at that point. So I don't think that is. I think what that manifesto proved is that actually if you put quite moderate arguments that actually, our railways would be better run if they were run for people rather than for the shareholders of private companies, that, actually we need to end austerity, we need more investment in children's schools and education and in our health service and in social care.
Tax the wealthy, all that sort of thing.
But
all those things that people agreed with.
People agree with it. And Keir Starmer doesn't scare the horses in the same way that Jeremy Corbyn did. He's not got the sort of baggage that the Daily Mail would dredge up on a daily basis.
Right,
but he can say these things, make these arguments, and the thing is, Keir Starmer promised to. When he was elected leader, he stood on a very Corbynite platform, very similar to what Jeremy stood on in 2015 when he became leader, and said, these are my 10 policy pledges.
Right, but unfortunately...
Haven't heard hide nor hair of them.
All right, but all of those things are true, but they lost. With that policy, with all of those policies, with that manifesto, they lost.
Yeah, well, look, we lost in 2010 when we had, a kind of Blairite policy programme. We lost in 2015 with a kind of centrist one under Ed Miliband. We've lost the last 4 elections. There's no faction of the Labour Party, no wing of the Labour Party has a monopoly on success or loss, to be honest. You can win on a very radical... I mean, you look at the 1945 manifesto, it makes the 2017 one look like the Liberal Democrats, to be honest.
A different world, though, isn't it? Do you think that
this is... But you create a different world. Political leadership is about creating the climate for debate. Boris Johnson's done it. He has changed the political terrain on which... debates are being fought.
But do you think that this is typical left wing? When the right wing need to, they all get in line. They all repeat the same phrases.
The right wing all get in line. I must have missed that period under Jeremy Corbyn.
No, I'm not talking about the right wing of the Labour Party. I'm talking.
I see.
I'm talking about the right. When it matters, they all get in line and speak from the same hymn sheet. The left, meanwhile, form a circular firing squad and shoot each other to death.
Yeah, I think that's true, and it obviously has happened when Jeremy Corbyn was leader, but it's also happening now. But the problem is, I think, is that people don't know what the party stands for. I think there's a policy platform. I mean, Keir Starmer got elected on basically a kind of slightly moderated Jeremy Corbyn style policy platform, the continuity sort of platform, and that united the party. The party was happy with that. He won by a very big margin, Keir Starmer, when he was elected leader. He got over 50% of the vote amongst Labour members and affiliates, trade unionists and so on. If he'd stuck to that, I don't think there'd be any problem. There'd be a few naysayers and so on. I would have given him the benefit of the doubt if he'd stuck to that and just articulated it in a more loyally, kind of moderate sort of way. Absolutely fine. No problem with it. The fact of the matter is we haven't heard any or very little in terms of political argument. He's not doing well. I mean, Harold Wilson had a phrase for this, didn't he? It was, the Labour Party's like a stagecoach. If you rattle along at great speed, everyone's too sick or too excited to get out and argue with each other. The minute you stop, everyone gets out and argues about which direction you should be going in. Right. And that's the problem for Keir Starmer. He's not set a direction. And that's what leaders do.
So do you think
Harold
that it's
Wilson
time?
Did it,
so do you think it's time for a
Tony
change?
Blair did it.
Do you think it's time for? Do you think it's time for a change? And if so, who?
Reluctantly, I probably do. Look, it's not my sole decision. I don't like personalising this. But look, if you're on the, I'll say this: if you're on the right of the party, the more moderate wing, you're probably looking at the party and thinking, I bet FX people would be doing a better job. If you're in the kind of centre of the party, you might think, oh, well, actually, Ed Miliband's learned a lot over the last few years. Maybe him. If you're on the left, you might look to Rebecca Long-Bailey or John McDonnell or somebody like that. All of whom, by the way, I think would probably be doing a better job than Keir Starmer at the moment. And I say that as somebody on the left who would much prefer it with somebody on the left. But look, the fact of the matter is, Keir Starmer is neither fish nor fowl at the moment. He doesn't seem to stand for anything. He seems to be, kind of just scraping along the bottom, not doing much, not having a clear thing to the public. And the public have reacted. The public are reacted. They don't think he's a prime minister. They don't think he's a good leader. And they don't want to vote for the Labour Party at the moment. Our polling's poor. He's not picked it up from where Jeremy Corbyn was. And everybody, kind of piles in and says Jeremy Corbyn is a terrible leader. Keir Starmer's doing worse.
OK, thanks, Andrew. That's Andrew Fisher, who wrote the Labour's Manifesto in 2017. He was also the party's executive director of policy under Jeremy Corbyn. So do you think that any of that is actually fair? I mean, we are in a weird time, aren't we? It's akin to wartime, when people are encouraged or they feel propelled to rally around the flag and to support the leader, whoever that might be. And it is Boris Johnson at the moment, of course. So it is a bit hard. It is a tough job at the moment for the leader of the opposition, Keir Starmer. I mean, do you know what he stands for? How can he improve his standing from this point? And is the Labour Party right to be in a period of self-examination, which is what it appears to be at the moment, as Andrew was saying, on the day of freedom, this sort of stuttering freedom that we're going to be experiencing tomorrow? The Labour Party are making news by gazing at their own navel. So the Labour Party is not in rude health. Their ruling National Executive Committee is going to be asked to proscribe 4 toxic organisations, that's what they are being described as, which promote communism, claim anti-Semitism allegations are overblown, and demand that whips restore Jeremy Corbyn as a Labour MP. He's been chucked out of the Parliamentary Labour Party, not the Labour Party itself, of course. Those to be banned include Resist and Labour Against the Witch Hunt, which claim that anti-Semitism allegations were politically motivated, and Labour in Exile, which expressly welcomes expelled or suspended members. The openly communist socialist appeal is also going to become a forbidden group. The Mirror was carrying this story today, amongst other papers, and they say that they understand that anyone found to be a member of any group, of any of these groups, is going to be automatically expelled from the Labour Party. It really is just typical left, isn't it, really? I mean, as I was saying earlier on, the right wing do get their ducks in order when it's necessary, but the left seem to be just obsessed with a purity contest. 0345 6060 973. Birmingham. Hello, Bruce.
Oh, yeah, good evening.
Bruce.
Hello, sorry. I have just joined the Labour Party past 2 years, and previously I lived abroad for 30 years, and I would say my politics are well on the left, like Momentum-like, but I'm not a member of Momentum, I'm a member of the Labour Party, and I'm shocked in these 2 years at the infighting in our constituency, which has a Labour MP, with the left, Momentum that is, trying to unseat the MP. It's shocking, with no focus on government policy, like you say, a circular firing squad of the left. Hopeless. No sense of wanting to compromise. And I think Starmer's dead right. Take on board these people, and if you join the Labour Party, you don't join Momentum, or you don't join the right-wing crowd. Progress, you join the Labour Party. End of story.
But do you think that that being, as how they're making such a public deal about it, that they are actually reinforcing in some members of the public's mind that these supposed extremist organisations are associated with Labour?
Well, perhaps. I mean, the thing is that if he tackles these things now, he gets them out of the way, I think. So why not? I mean, his popularity is pretty low, so deal with these things in the bum. But if my constituency is anything to go by, it's shocking. There's no discussion or focus on how do we get the Tories out of office and the policies we should adopt. It's just all infighting. And it's just ridiculous. I mean, I would say my politics are on the left, but I'm prepared to compromise. I'd rather see even the Liberal Democrats in power than this lot. I mean, it's shocking. So I think he's spot on, Starmer. Go for it.
Right. Okay.
I mean, people say he lacks charisma, but does charisma? We've got a prime minister with so-called charisma, and look at the mess he's making of it.
Yeah, he has.
So charisma doesn't get you a long way, does it?
Well,
really?
He has charisma overload. It gets you to win an election, and I suppose that's the important part. And then you get to introduce your own policies to the country afterwards. But that's the important bit: is winning in the first place.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that's something that Keir Starmer can actually do. I mean, there's no evidence so far that that is something that he would find possible. Brian in Gloucester says, your guest berates Starmer for looking internally and proceeds to deride him. Labour must get rid of the poison within. Now is the time. Well, I suppose if they're going to do it, then they should do so at some considerable distance from a general election. But it does sort of reinforce the idea that Labour is all at sea, to me, to continually look within rather than score on what is absolutely an open goal. How do they keep missing? So do you know what Keir Starmer stands for? And if not, what could he do to improve his standing? Croydon, Evelyn.
Good evening, Nick. A great show.
Thanks.
Nick, I think we're being a little unfair to Keir Starmer because if you watch him at PMQs, I think he's great. I mean, and you've got a Prime Minister who never answers the question, who gets loud, starts sort of name-calling, never answers a question. That's one. The second point, what's the point in Keir Starmer talking about policies now when he can't, in fact, implement them? Surely nearer the time of the election is the time to come out with his policies.
Yeah, but it's a bit late then, though, isn't it? Because people are making their minds up now, and it's very hard to dissuade people of an opinion they've already formed of somebody at a short period before they are going to be persuaded to try to put their X in the respective box in the ballot in a polling station.
But what I can't understand, we're appearing very much like America with Mr. Trump. People just following him about the election said it was a fake when it wasn't. It seems like the people here, even though all the things Boris Johnson is, I voted him in, believe it or not, but I'm disappointed. And I'll say something else. I mean, maybe this is not relevant, but I turn the television off every time he comes on looking with his hair. I see red, Nick. I tell you, I see red.
Well, there's a significant number of the population that quite like that extraordinarily. I mean, I can understand that they would like it in an entertainer, but not in somebody who is leading a country during a deadly pandemic. That part I don't understand. Thanks for that, Evelyn. But it's about Keir Starmer at the moment, about the Labour Party gazing at its own navel. They are about to... plans are on the agenda at the NEC meeting on Tuesday, expected to pass. More than 1,000 members could be auto-excluded as a result. These are what are being described as poisonous campaign groups. It's a purge, perhaps. 1,000 members. There's about 500,000 members of the Labour Party, so it's not going to significantly reduce their overall membership, but it is going to get a lot of publicity. Is this the sort of publicity that the Labour Party needs right now? 0345 6060 973. Yeovil. Hello, Olivia.
Hi, Nick.
Olivia.
Yeah, I think Starmer's completely right, actually, on this, to be clearing out the troublemakers, and that's what they are. They're these people. We're not talking about. Just so you know, I run the local Labour Party in Yeovil, so I see a lot of what goes on internally. And Keir Starmer stood on a pledge to make us electable. That's what he was elected to the leadership on, and that's exactly what he's doing. Now, I actually work as... I'm an aircraft engineer by trade, so very kind of manual shop floor, very heavily unionised, 99% and up on the shop floor. And yet I could probably name on one hand the number of lads I work with who voted Labour at the last election, which isn't right. That's not, and clearly, and whenever you ask them, well, hang on a minute, mate, what's going on? It's Corbyn's name comes up, and communism and momentum and that side of things. And I can tell you from internally, I've always tried to create an atmosphere of kind of, you know, we are a bit of a broad party, and there's different opinions on things, and that's fine. But there's some nasty, nasty people who I'm surprised are still in the party. And we're not talking about people who perhaps didn't vote for Keir and, you know, maybe don't like him. These groups in particular are horrible. And
but do you think that what you're describing is why your colleagues on the shop floor, why they didn't vote Labour as you would expect manual Labours to do? Because they surely wouldn't be aware of any of that. What they're repeating, it seems, from what you said, is what was said about Jeremy Corbyn in the press, in the right-wing press, who pummeled him. I mean, I can't remember anybody getting as much grief and being attacked to such an extent by the right-wing press as Jeremy Corbyn. I mean, they just smashed him to smithereens.
They did, yeah.
The same thing is not true, really, of Keir Starmer, is it? And I wonder if that's because the right-wing press in this country don't see him as a threat, don't see him electable.
Well, I think that's probably a mistake on their part, if I'm honest, because I think he is electable, and I think what he's doing at the minute is making the party electable, and it's a slow, painful process. But you are right about Corbyn. But I've been knocking doors for the Labour Party for years now, actually, and in Yeovil, it got to the point where we'd be walking around and I'd have my head in my hands because there wasn't one door that I knocked on who said, I don't mind Labour, but I'm not voting for Corbyn. And perhaps that is to do with there was some unfair press, probably quite a lot of it, but there were some issues there that had to be worked out, that Keir Starmer has worked out and has probably made himself a little bit unpopular within the party by doing it. But that doesn't mean that those things didn't have to be done. You know, there was a problem, and that there is a problem with education around anti-Semitism within the party and what constitutes anti-Semitism. And there is a great deal of people who have become... They've got this sort of tribal loyalty to the Corbyn side of the Labour Party and to Jeremy Corbyn himself. And don't get me wrong, I supported him when he was leader because I care about the party as a whole. You know, that's what matters to me. But I feel like a lot of these people don't care about the party and don't care about the kind of the greater good, if you like. It's become almost like a footballification of left versus right. I'm tired of being called right wing because I voted for Keir Starmer. He's a socialist for for heaven's sake, you know.
But do you think that by bringing this up again, I mean, it could have been done perhaps more undercover. I mean, they didn't have to publicise this so much, that by continually bringing this up, that they are, in fact, cementing in the mind of the public that there is an issue with communism, as they say, and anti-Semitism and so on.
Well, I think the public, as you say, I think the public already know that there's those things within the party and that there's various different factions. And actually, a lot of what seems to come out, just personally, just whenever I talk to, for example, people I work with, is that they're very uncomfortable. They're glad that Corbyn's gone, but they still think there's too many traces of that kind of radical, extreme left wing.
Right, those are the people that are in the party. Sorry to interrupt, but those are the people that are in the party. What about your mates on the shop floor?
Oh, that's what I was saying.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's them who I think, and perhaps they have read it in tabloid news and whatnot, but they are the ones who, and I'm not going to put them down, they know as much about politics as anybody else, you know, and they will kind of, there's no trust there, and they think, well, Corbyn's gone, yeah, fine, but it's still within the party, and they're probably right, you know, because there has been some, in our local meetings, there's been some things, topics that have come up, and you think, what on earth is going on? So I'm glad that he's rooting it out. I think it needs to happen.
All right, thanks for that, Olivia. 0345 6060 973. Let's have Woolwich. Richard.
Oh, hi, Nick. Nice to speak to you. Hi. No, I agree with the previous caller. I admire Keir Starmer, and I think what he's doing is part of that transition. It's very, very depressing for me that after decades and decades of voting Labour, we're still having this discussion which is about loony left versus the rest. I think what Keir Starmer needs to say is a strong message, which is a kind of a Kinnock message, and I remember that message, which is socialism is a game for ideologues. You know, if you want to put on a duffel coat and a carpet bag full of Social Weekly and go to the local tube station and dish out on a Saturday, great, fantastic. But that's a hobby. If you want to get into power and prevent a government such as the Johnson government, which I think is extremely right-wing, and if you want to actually make some changes and shift the debate away from allowing privileged families to continue to have the power, to a narrative of opportunity, which I think is what modern the Labour is about, then we have to purge the party of these ideologues, and we have to get real.
But do you think that Keir Starmer has actually differentiated himself enough from the Conservative Party for the public to really understand what the difference is?
I think that's a great question, and I think again no, I don't think he has. But it goes back to I think where you came in on this. We are in this pandemic. I think he's in a terrible situation. I don't know how he can straddle this divide between supporting the nation, as I think he's doing, and at the same time opposing the government. And he's got it right on some moments, he gets it wrong on the other moments. And I think he's the right man in the wrong moment of time. But I think he's the right man.
Okay.
I think Labour needs it.
All right, I'm going to have to leave it there. But thanks for that, Richard. Welcome to Freedom Day, for what it's worth. And the nation will be considering whether to wear a mask and whether to go to the shops and whether they are going to get pinged if they leave the home. And the Labour Party is considering itself. Labour's ruling National Executive Committee is going to be asked to proscribe 4 toxic organisations, that's their phrase, toxic organisations, which promote communism, claim anti-Semitism allegations are overblown, and demand that whips restore Jeremy Corbyn as the Labour MP. He's an independent at the moment, of course. He's part of the Labour Party, not the Parliamentary Labour Party. The plans on the agenda at the NEC meeting on Tuesday are expected to pass, and more than 1,000 members could be excluded as a result. One Labour source said, under Corbyn, Those from far-left fringes with poisonous beliefs and warped world views were welcomed into the party. Keir is right to stamp out anti-Semitism and toxic extremism and get the party back into the decent mainstream of Labour values. Well, what are those values? Does anybody really have a clear idea of what the policies are under the current leadership of the Labour Party? 0345 6060 973. Mansfield. Hello, George.
Hi, good morning.
George.
Nicky, you all right? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Go ahead.
Well, I'm a member of a Labour Party, and in fact, I'm a secretary of one of our local branches. It just beguiles me, really, to see what's happening. Don't really start this debate, really, because I've been through it so many times. I mean, I was in the miners' dispute within Nottinghamshire when we were put through the same sort of position. I was not representing anybody or doing, but I just don't think, right, particularly like within Labour Party structure. I'm not talking about the structure of the National Executive. I'm talking about local structure that we're not geared actually to winning anything. It's all about an argument about the rule book. It's about an argument about this. It's almost as though we're frightened to take our issues out to the public and debate them. It's no matter about left or right. It's about the structure of the Labour Party. We have had an MP here now who's gone over to you on your rival radio station who was supported by many people as being like a sort of supporter of mainstream politics. And we've been through this game so many times. We've got to stand for something. And I'm afraid that the ideological argument has shifted to the right, and we're being based upon what we believe is arguments of the right. And we've got to believe in something. If you don't believe in anything, then we just might well pack up. I'm sorry to say this, but I've listened to some of your other contributions. But the Labour Party does stand for... I mean, we go out into the community and under Corbyn, right, yes, you can have your arguments against him. My branch swelled up to over 400 young lads. They all weren't converted into communism or Stalinism or anything. Each and every ward meeting, we had nearly 50 or 60. 80% of those were young people, young, energetic people within our party. If I hold a meeting next week after the pandemic situation, I'd be lucky to have 10.
Yeah, he did increase the membership of the party by an enormous amount, and surely not all of those people, not even a significant number of them, could be described as extremists.
No, not any of them. Not any of them. I mean, you got some of the young ones within between 19 and, 25, 26 who wanted to take over the running of the branch, not because they wanted to exert Stalinist policies or communist policies. They saw what was happening to the young, and also they saw what was happening in the community. They took the arguments within the community and knocked on the doors. All right, they got lots of problems within that. But all I'm saying is the structure of the Labour Party it's not just a matter of the National Executive Committee weeding out left people that actually have a position within the Labour Party. It's a matter of the structure of the Labour Party. It's not really geared to actually winning power. And there's another thing that's really vital. People just don't understand that the overall left vote actually exceeds the Tories. Now, the Labour Party's got to make tough decisions about whether they can amalgamate with other parties of similar opinions, the Greens, in some cases, the Lib Dems, because, we are going to be decades before we win power back. And I'm a big believer, that cometh the hour, that the Labour Party will win power. I can remember the Thatcher days when it was seen so hopeless. We're never going to win power again.
Yes, but Margaret Thatcher was a very divisive figure, and if a politician stays around long enough, they are going to become unwelcome, and that was the case with her. But Boris Johnson's a bit different, and there's no suggestion really that he's in it for the long run.
He isn't.
No. So perhaps it won't be Boris Johnson in the next general election that Keir Starmer is fighting, but that might be the key. That what will keep Labour out perhaps forever, is that the left-wing vote does get split in this country between the three parties that you mentioned, the Greens, the Lib Dems and the Labour Party. There isn't really any comparable choice on the right wing. So we will forever have a minority Conservative government unless somebody in the Labour Party makes the decision that they're going to form a coalition with other left-wing parties. And it might be that somebody centrist, somebody unthreatening, non-frightening, like Keir Starmer, is just the very chap to persuade those other parties that this might be in their best interests.
Well, it could be. I'm not making this. As Bob Dylan said, don't follow leaders; they're just walking parking meters. You know, we're still focused in this country upon leaders, right? As though leaders are something symbolic of what a party should stand for. And what I'm saying is, I want the point I'm putting a suggestion. Yes, I mean, three-quarters of the argument tonight is about the personality and the development of Keir Starmer. But it's not about that. It's about whether that person can represent, right, the feelings and the emotions and the policies that can lead this country forward to more equality and a better developed society that embraces everyone. That is the real issue. That is the real issue. Now, at the end of the day, if the Labour Party wants to, put forward sacrificial lambs or, and put forward, because all that is just feeding is the right wing. That's where it's all. That's where this is all end up.
Well, it does highlight corners of the party that the party itself would not want to be illuminated, but they are they're shooting themselves in the foot essentially by making that the story. George, thanks for that. 0345 6060 973. This text says, I agree that Keir Starmer must, to a degree, bide his time to allow the public to become less enamoured with Boris Johnson. However, I think he needs to be clearer about his vision for the UK post-COVID and his strategy for managing COVID. He should not be afraid to tell the uncomfortable truths and should engage alliances with other parties. It is a difficult time to be the leader of the opposition because there's many things that he finds himself, I'm sure, painted into a corner that he has to be standing at the dispatch box agreeing with his opposite number. I'm sure it grates enormously, but often he has no other choice, surely. And I wonder on that topic about associating himself with the other parties, specifically the Greens and the Liberal Democrats, is Keir Starmer actually the very sort of person that is best placed to be that chap who would suggest a coalition of sorts, because he is so very unthreatening and he doesn't have the kind of baggage that Jeremy Corbyn had. I wonder if in that respect he's exactly the chap for the job. 0345 6060 973. Carnforth. Hello, Annie.
Hello, Nick. How are you doing?
Good, thanks.
Good. I just thought, why are they doing this at the moment? You just don't need this kind of publicity. Just, if they wanted to do it, just do it. Don't make a big song and dance about it. I think some of the people that are advising Keir Starmer seem to think that the only problem, the Labour Party had and why they lost the last election was because of this dreadful left-wing Jeremy Corbyn, but it was much, much more than that. And it's been going on for a long time. Gradually losing votes. We lost Scotland, and now we've lost all these Red Wall ones. And I just don't think Keir Starmer's the right person. And it's not because I didn't vote for him and I'm on the left of the party. I don't care which side of the party people, whether they're on the left or the centre or the right. But we need a new leader because he's just not appealing to people. He's just so lacking in any, spark or oomph. He's got no personality, really. I'm sure he's very sincere, But, you know, you've got to have somebody that can inspire people and actually be a good speaker, be clear about what the policies are, and make people want to go out and vote for you.
But do you think that there's a possibility that the country might have had it up to its eyeballs with personality?
Well, I don't mean like a clown like Boris Johnson, although a very evil one. No, I don't mean that kind of thing. I just mean somebody who can really speak well and engage people. I mean, from the opposite side of the party, to me, there are people like Andy Burnham. I mean, Lisa Nandy is quite popular in the north, and I do think it needs to be somebody from the north or the Midlands if we want to get those red wall seats back. And if we don't get them back, then I think Labour are finished.
But, you know, you say that, and I've heard that before. We must have somebody from the north to attract people from the north. But the people from the north just voted for the most southern person you could possibly imagine.
Yeah, but I think, you know, all of those seats, those red wall seats, they were all heavily Brexit seats, and that's why they voted for, well, I was just going to say something very rude, but yeah, a complete idiot. You know, that's why they voted for him, a posh idiot, because he was saying, I'm going to get Brexit done, and that's all they cared about. And unfortunately, it seems to still be all people care about.
Yeah.
It's not about left and right anymore. It's about the cult of Brexit and the cult of, you know, Boris Johnson, because he gave it to them. And I think also, you know, as far as those seats are concerned, Keir Starmer's completely the wrong person, because he was such an arch Remainer, and people remember that. And they also seem to think that he's posh, you know, because I was listening to a Vox Pop taken in Batley and Spen just before that by-election, and they asked a woman how she was going to vote. She said, well, I'm not voting Labour. She said, I don't like that Keir Starmer. She said, he's posh and privately educated.
Yeah.
Well, neither of those things are actually true.
Yeah, I heard that too, yeah.
Yeah, I think he comes over as that. He comes over
it's the sir part that I think is acting not in his best interests.
Yeah, absolutely not. I mean, you definitely should drop that. But I think the media all the time goes on and calls him sir.
Yeah.
But also, you know, he's just another bland middle-class suit from London. He does sound middle-class, even though his background isn't really, because of his, you know, education in his previous jobs. He sounds quite... And he's so boring, you know, just needs somebody that'll inspire people, and he just doesn't do it.
But,
I mean,
but on that subject of, it seems unlikely that the Labour Party is going to get a majority because the left vote is split by the SNP, as you say, Liberal Democrat and the Greens. Is it possible that Keir Starmer is just the sort of very person that could... persuade the other parties to join them in a coalition, whereas if it's somebody more divisive, somebody more threatening, perhaps, like Jeremy Corbyn character, or even Andy Burnham, somebody like that, somebody less bland and generally acceptable, it wouldn't work.
I don't know about that, but people just don't like him. And I don't think Andy Burnham's very popular now, particularly in the north. He's got a lot higher profile since he's been the mayor of Manchester. And he's to the right of the party. I mean, I'm sure he would have appealed to sort of Lib Dems, and I mean, possibly he's to the right of the Greens, you know. I mean, but I mean, Keir Starmer is too. Keir Starmer sort of got, you know, that elected with under false pretenses, really, because he was making out that he was pretty much going to carry on with a lot of Jeremy Corbyn's policies and kept saying he was a socialist, but then he's kind of dropped them, and he doesn't... he's certainly not united the party. That's another thing he said he was going to do. He's just really gone for people on the left. I mean, there's other people too, like Angela Rayner. She's sort of soft left, and she's very popular on all sides of the party. And she can sock it to people. And I know she's young and everything, but I mean, Keir Starmer doesn't have much political experience. He's only been in the party 6 years, so you know, I just despair. Really, we just need a new leader. We need somebody with a bit of oomph in them.
Right. Okay. Thanks for that, Annie. What exactly does the Labour Party stand for? I mean, is that clear yet? Is he cutting through? I mean, he has, as a caller a while ago suggested, had some success at the dispatch box lately. They did win Batley and Spen, although it was much closer than I'm sure they would have liked. Is it possible that he could actually turn things around and affect a win at the next general election? And what about that idea of joining in with other left-leaning parties in order to vanquish the Conservative Party, who it's entirely possible that the Labour Party will never get in unless they join in with other parties, because the left vote will always be split to some extent amongst the Greens, the Lib Dems, the SNP and the Labour Party, whereas if you're on the right wing, you've only got the Tories. But there is, it is true that the right-wing vote is smaller in this country than the left-wing vote, and yet the Conservative Party keep winning. Sunderland. Hello, Paul.
Oh, yeah, you all right?
Good, thanks.
I think you're right in what you're saying about Keir Starmer having to join forces with the other parties and promote proportional representation.
He's been asked about this, though. I mean, we've been through this, haven't we? And he said no.
Well, he's making a big mistake. I mean, I'm disappointed in him. I mean, I've listened to him on paying her Prime Minister's question times, and I mean, he's okay there because he doesn't get an answer off Bojo. But I've never heard him on about the effect of Brexit. It's all been about agreeing with the Tories with coronavirus and the restrictions, which I mean, he's doing the right thing because as regards to that, but I haven't heard a dicky bird about Brexit and the effect of it.
But also, I mean, on the effect of it's not the effect of COVID, it's the effect of the government's reaction to COVID. It's such an open goal. I mean, their handling of it has been so catastrophic. Virtually every other country, every other sort of major first world country in the world has done better than we have. It's been one failure after the next, and it's such an open goal. It's just extraordinary that he keeps skying the ball into the stands.
Well, I can't believe that people are not shouting from the rooftops about all the care homes and the people who have died through COVID in the care homes. I mean, people just don't seem to be bothered about that. It's all news. I mean, the Tories have definitely mishandled things. But they'll say, well, could Corbyn have done better? And I don't think we'd be in as much a mess as what we're in if Corbyn was in charge. And I'm not a Corbyn lover.
Yeah, the amount of times that I've heard, well, who could have done better? He should leave him alone. He's doing his best. What other leader could have done better? Well, the answer to that question is pretty much every other leader of every other first world country on earth has done better. So all of them. And I agree. I don't think we'd be in the kind of mess that we're in if Jeremy Corbyn had won. I think this is the Boris Johnson variant we're suffering under now. Thanks for that, Paul. 0345 6060 973. Clitheroe. Hello, Steve.
Hello, Nick. What a privilege.
Steve.
I've been a big fan of yours, and I love the way you articulate the whole Jeremy Corbyn story. And I've been a Labour supporter for a number of years. And to be honest with you, when Jeremy Corbyn became the leader, and I was speaking to somebody, and they said, "Oh no, I'm not Jeremy Corbyn." And I was like, "Oh, I don't really know very much about him and stuff." And there was this negativity from another Labour person straight away, and it turns out this was before the anti-Semitism row all erupted, and this was just because he was a campaigner, wasn't he? He was out every weekend. He was campaigning for something, and I don't think he was very popular within the Labour Party, particularly Tony Blair's Labour Party. Yeah. As a result of that, but the problem is with Jeremy Corbyn is it's consistently lied about the whole story. Now, if you talk about anti-Semitism, if you think back to 2015 and Ed Miliband, who I thought was a great leader, and I've met him, and he's a lovely bloke, and I'm glad to see him back on the front benches again, and I think he'll do very well for us. But do you remember the Daily Mail story about Ed Miliband's dad?
Remind me.
But it was to do with the fact that he was Jewish, and they ran a very, very anti-Semitic story just in the lead up to the 2015 election. And then, of course, there was the Bacon Butty situation and all this absolute nonsense. So when Corbyn came in, the only reason I got interested, really, in it, and, I became a massive Corbyn supporter, was because what I saw when Angela Eagle and all the others were swooping around trying to do the coup. Do you remember his cabinet, his shadow cabinet walked out and left him, and there was these humiliating pictures of him on the TV news, the top story, where he sat in that room just looking like a bullied old man to me. And that was the day I thought, do you know what, I'm not having this, because he's the Labour leader. And Keir Starmer, I'm sure he's a lovely bloke. I'm sure that all of his policies are very similar to that of Corbyn. But what everybody ignores, and what really frustrates me, is that 2017, Corbyn upset everybody in British politics with the results that he got in Theresa May's snap election. And everybody dismisses that. They go back to the 2019 one, and it boiled down to one thing and one thing alone, and that was Brexit. And all the messing about that had gone on for 2 years previously about, let's get out of the EU and let's get Brexit done and all that stuff. That's all that election was. And this red wall nonsense and all the rest of it, it was all to do with Brexit. And that you make, I love Friday and Saturdays. Sunday, I notice you're a lot more serious, and I enjoy both formats that you do, Nick. But I think on Friday and Saturday, you absolutely smash it out the park in articulating exactly what's going on in this country right now. And I think you're one of the few who actually does it. And, more power to your arm. But my main point that I'd like to say is Scotland, vote Labour. Every election. It's the Scottish Labour Party now, and they're called the SNP. And it's the thickest thing I've ever seen in my life, because they're complaining that they're ruled by Westminster. So what do? They weaken the only opposition, the only valid opposition to the Tory party.
Well, unless the Labour Party and the SNP and the Greens and the Lib Dems combine their forces, by which method the majority would have their vote count. Because at the moment, the majority of the people in this country, their vote actually doesn't count, because there is only one party on the right, and so they get what Boris Johnson called a stonking majority from a minority of the votes. Steve, I'm going to have to leave it there, but thanks for that. That article that he was talking about, by the way, from 2013, it was headlined "The Man Who Hated Britain." The subhead is "Red Ed's pledge to bring back socialism is an homage to the Marxist father that he idolised. So what did Miliband Sr. really believe in? The answer should disturb everyone who loves this country." So not necessarily anti-Semitic, but it was designed to alarm. But, I think that's just typical for the Daily Mail. And that's why they are so successful, is because they successfully alarm their readership. Keir Starmer is expelling far-left Labour members, about 1,000 of them. The NEC, Labour's ruling National Executive Committee, on Tuesday is going to pass, it is expected, a vote to expel 1,000 members who will be automatically excluded from the party as a result of that vote. Your calls on 0345 6060 973. Questions I'm asking. Do you know what Keir Starmer actually stands for? What does the Labour Party stand for these days? How can he improve its standing? It seems as though one open goal after the other has been missed. It's really extraordinary at this point how the Labour Party is still trailing in the polls. How have they managed to pull disaster from the jaws of success? Richmond, hello, Steve.
Oh, hi, Nick. How are you?
Good, thanks.
Yeah. I think it's an impossible task for Starmer or for anyone else. I think the problem is one of alignment. You've got I always think of it in terms of if you were to take the 10 sort of main left, centre-left type issues. You put them all on a bit of paper, and you enter the parliamentary Labour Party and the members, and said, right, you can have 3 of those. There's a genie in the lamp here, and you can have 3 of those. And then you went to what I'll call the traditional working class Labour voters and said, here's the same list of 10. You can have 3 of those.
Yeah.
I bet you the 3 would be totally different from the 3 chosen by the PLP and the members. They're moving apart. That's why I found it so interesting. People's the discussion about, well, why don't they join up with the Lib Dems and the Greens? It's already too big of a church. You've got to prioritise issues, and
but there is.
The Lib Dems retain a coalition. What would the first? Imagine they came close enough that the Lib Dems actually could turn it.
Yes.
In a coalition.
Yes, but I understand what you're saying. But other countries, an enormous number of other countries that are our major competitors are run by coalitions who would not agree with each other on most policies, but they managed to rub along for the benefit of the majority of the voters who would otherwise have their opinions and their votes ignored were they not to have formed a coalition of pretty much like-minded people.
Well, imagine it, but just saying the Lib Dems, the first condition they would have for a coalition would be a second referendum. So sell that to the Red Wall.
Right. OK, thanks, Steve. 0345 6060 973. San Francisco. Hello, Dave.
Hey, next time you talk to Dave Ross, ask him about his stellar career with the Seattle Gilbert and Sullivan Society.
I will not.
Keir Starmer is your John Kerry. 2004, John Kerry running against George W. Bush. By this time, we were almost a year into the Iraq War. It was clear the intelligence was faked. It was clear there were no weapons of mass destruction. And John Kerry, for the life of him, couldn't get a coherent position out on the Iraq War in that campaign. It was all very vague, interesting statements about supporting the war on terror and supporting our troops, because the Democratic Party was terrified of being painted as unpatriotic. And Keir Starmer's in the same trap. He's intelligent, he's well-meaning, he has great integrity, and he's about as exciting as watching paint dry. And he is desperately trying to avoid taking a clear position. It's funny, we moved back here to the United States last year. And all through I'll use the B word, the Brexit debate, I never knew what Labour stood for. Labour said, well, we respect the electorate, but we're not thrilled about this. And now with this pandemic, this should be your Iraq war as a campaign issue. This should be a slam dunk. Such a colossal dumpster fire of how the Johnson administration or cabal has handled this. And yet Labour is terrified of coming out and saying you're killing people through your incompetence because they're afraid they'll be seen as mean.
I think unpatriotic is exactly right.
And the other parties, the Lib Dems, the SNP, the Greens, you can say, can't they be practical and see the coalition, even with a partner you don't like, is still a coalition, you're still a seat at the table. The other parties are like, we have no desire to get into bed with people who have absolutely no spine. And until Labour actually stands for something other than we're not the Tories and we don't want to privatize the NHS, which is the only two clear positions the Labour Party has, which are great positions, but until there's clarity beyond that, the mass of the electorate that hasn't voted for them before isn't going to cross the line and support them. They won't win a general.
All right, good to talk to you. Thanks, Dave. 0345 6060 973 from San Francisco to Milan. Robert.
Hi, Nick. How are you?
Yes, good.
Another time. Good time to speak.
Good, thanks. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. What my point was very simple. Keir is obviously a top lawyer, and I think he was the Department of Public Prosecutions or whatever.
Yeah, director.
And given the way the Tory party have done so much corruption and whatnot, I just don't understand why he hasn't literally, hauled Boris into, the local criminal court under, unfit to hold a public office, which is a common criminal crime anyway. I just don't understand how he, with all the PPE stuff, with all the, all the dodgy dealings that have been going on, I just don't understand why he hasn't used his own legal career to crucify Boris.
Yeah, it does seem as though, I could score in that open goal, and I have no legal knowledge or am good at football. So it seems extraordinary that they don't seem to be able to put any punches on the Conservative Party.
And then you have you've introduced the Good Law Project and Joe Moynihan or whatever his name is on LBC, and he's the one who's doing all the legal preparations against the Boris and the Tory party. But given Keir, I just don't understand why the three of them aren't just working together to destroy the government.
It does, it mystifies me really how they have managed to fashion a failure in this regard. Why? How is Boris Johnson still ahead in the polls? How? Thanks, Robert. Seven Oaks. Hello, Mark.
Hi. I agree with that last previous caller about the Brexit policy. I mean, is Labour's Brexit policy credible to Brexiters?
Yeah, I think that once the B word comes up, people's eyes glaze over and they just stop listening. I just don't think it's a goer for the Labour Party to try to reverse out of that. I think you've got to just take it and move on, talk about something else.
Well, Ian Dale seems to think that, even he has said that half the people now want to rejoin, according to the polls. And that doesn't include the 6 million EU residents, many of whom could become citizens immediately, and all of whom could become citizens soon.
Yeah, Brexit
is doomed. It has no future.
Well, perhaps. I don't think has a future is trying to, at this point, go through that again. I just think that their shoulders will just droop and think, oh, God, no, I just can't stand it. I'd rather talk about COVID. I just don't think it's a winner. Mark, I've run out of time, but thanks for that.